You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Happy Saturday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Yeah, we missed yesterday. That's running around like a chicken with my head cut off, getting some of this house stuff. Again, underestimating. Anyway, I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. Hopefully we won't be intermittent anymore. I'm going to try to do one Easter Sunday to make up again for missed episodes. We'll try to hit them all. But nonetheless, today we are going to do the defensive depth chart, my version of that. I'm sure that those of you watching are very happy to see I'm wearing Michigan gear. I'm also wearing the Michigan joggers. It's full home field Michigan gear. Since y'all care way too much about what I wear. Anyhow, all right, we're going to get into my defensive depth chart. This one was a lot easier, I felt, than the offense in a lot of ways. So I actually brought the lights, the backlighting, and I just totally forgot to set them up. So you can see a little neighborhood and all that kind of stuff behind me. Probably doesn't look that pretty on that side. But that's the world we're living in here for a little while. Anyway, all right, let's get to it. All right, where's my notes? Here we go. We are prepared. So let's get to this. Let's start with we're going to do basically the front, then we'll do the linebackers, and then we'll do the secondary, and that's how that's going to go. And I don't think that any of this is going to be like a huge surprise, but there was some point in which it was like, oh, this position is so deep. I don't know how it goes. So starting with the quote defensive tackle, obviously the starter is your star on defense, and that is Chris Jenkins. He's likely to be a guy that really breaks out this year. He flashed already in the spring game. It was just kind of wild what he was able to do in very short order. And he's expected to really take a big step forward this year. So I am super excited to see what Chris Jenkins does, because he's supposed to be the star, and he's the tip of the spear just next to the nose tackle. Whereas the tip of the spear last year, I mean, it's kind of same but different, but he's got all the same attributes as Mozzie, vocal leader. He's going to be the guy that everyone's depending on. I'm very excited to see what Chris Jenkins does here. Behind him is Rayshawn Benny. And I think that, Rayshawn can also be a nose. I could be wrong, but I think he has that capability. It's the way that the defensive line is. There's some guys that can move around, and there's others guys that won't, right? Like Kenneth Grant's a nose all the way. You know what I mean? Mozzie Smith was a nose all the way. But certainly they played around with it, even going back to Don Brown. You know, they'll go with like that race car package. And we've seen some similar things. You know, we saw Mike Morris kind of line up as a, interior defensive lineman. It all is up for interpretation. Certainly they're just going to try to get matchups that they think are favorable due to situation. But I got Chris Jenkins, Rayshawn Benny as your two defensive tackles. As far as nose tackle, Mason Graham is your starter. And obviously I just mentioned Kenneth Grant, so he's your backup. But Mason Graham, who we didn't really talk about a lot this offseason, but certainly huge things are expected of him. And I mean, the same thing could be said of Kenneth Grant. I mean, really the great thing about this foursome is that it really is plug and play. I think the thing with the defense compared to the offense is when we're going through the offense, it's like, well, that guy might play a bit, but the starters are going to get the most run. That is not true of the majority of the defense. Pretty much every name that I mention here, maybe barring one or two guys, is going to get some pretty big run. And for some reason it deleted one of my names, but I know who have here. So pretty much everybody is probably going to get a pretty significant amount of play this year. And having a foursome at the interior tackle positions is just, it's gravy. That's exactly what you're hoping for. They can stay fresh. And that's not even mentioning some, Cam Good, who's on the list. That's not even mentioning Ike Iwunnah, who you hope in year 3 is taking a step forward and can get himself onto the field. So there's a lot of there are a lot of players that really could take that step forward. It's just a matter of will they. But those 4 that I just mentioned certainly are going to be a big part of it. So let's get to the 2 edge rushing positions. Your edge, as in your more traditional defensive end. I have Braden McGregor as your starter. Again, a little bit of flashing in the spring game. Spoken of the same way Mike Morris was spoken of last year, spoken the same way as any of the next great edge rushers are spoken of. So you hope that comes to fruition. So we will see. Behind him is Derek Moore entering year 2. I think Derek Moore is an absolute beast. I think he was a little disappointed with the way that his season went last year. But, I mean, it's year 1. You don't expect a freshman to necessarily contribute. He's another one that can line up in the interior as well if they decide to go with a little bit more of a race car package, right? Talk about the versatility. They've got the versatility. Heck, you can put Chris Jenkins out wide. You can put Rayshawn Benny out wide. You could put Braden McGregor potentially inside. I think he's bulked up a bit. I don't know if he's not quite Mike Morris size, but you can put him inside. You can put Derek Moore inside. The next 2, you can't. These next 2, the Sam linebacker, outside linebacker, essentially, those guys are going to stay outside, I would imagine. So your starter is the incumbent Jalen Harrell. He is going to be heavily influenced. Again, these guys can play on the other end too. So you could see Jalen Harrell, and who I have as his backup is Josiah Stewart. They very well might be on the field at the same time. Depends on if you're going with a pure speed option. I mean, they've just got all kinds of possibilities. You're going to see every single one of those players that I just mentioned in heavy rotation this year, barring any kind of health situations. So that's what I got. All right. So we are going to continue on. We're going to get to the linebackers and maybe the safeties. I don't know how this is going to exactly work. I don't know if we're going to do a whole segment on the linebackers, but we're going to try. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and move on. We'll do that momentarily. Before we do, the NBA playoffs are almost here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockdown. That's FanDuel.com/lockdown to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, we are continuing our breakdown of my proposed depth chart for the defensive side of the Michigan Wolverines. So let's go to the linebacker positions. I think we'll probably do the linebacker positions and we'll start the safeties just because it's 4-3-4. Maybe we'll do both safeties and do the corners afterwards. I'm not really sure how we're going to do this. But we'll see how this kind of pans out. So again, we have a star to start with, and that's Junior Colson. Colson obviously was a no-go in the spring. He was on one of those little scooter things. He is supposedly going to be 100% good by fall camp. So that's good news. He's your obvious star there. Need him to build on what he did last year. It was certainly more productive, but wasn't necessarily as flashy as it was in year 1. sometimes that happens, but it wasn't like he was a bad player by any stretch. He just maybe didn't have some of the things that you were hoping to see in certain cases. Maybe not as instinctive. But year 3, that's a lot of times when you see those middle linebackers kind of turn things up a notch, right? Like Devin Bush was a heat-seeking missile in year 2, and he was really good in year 2. It was year 3 when Devin Bush became otherworldly. You know what I mean? So you hope that that's kind of the case for Junior Colson. I have his backup as Jimmy Rolder. It really could be Jimmy Rolder or Ernest Hausman. But you'll kind of see where I went, how I did this with the next one, but it's probably not great. But I think, I would probably say that I did this wrong. So I'll say it's probably Ernest Hausman or Jimmy Rolder as the backup. And that said, you're absolutely going to see all 3 of those guys, right? You're 100% going to see all 3. It's again, we're talking about the depth, right? Like Jimmy Rolder played a lot as a freshman, and yes, he looked like a freshman. You hope he takes that step forward. Ernest Hausman started at Nebraska as a freshman, looked insane in the spring game, and he's going to see a lot of time this year for Michigan as well. So the next linebacker spot, I have Nikhai Hill-Green or Mike Barrett. So this is where we're starting to get, I have Ernest Hausman, just for spoiler, as the backup there. I think it either side or either way, you're just going to see an insane rotation at linebacker. Remember all of the times that we were sitting there questioning, I suddenly feel insanely good about the linebacker position and everything that can kind of go well there, right? Because you have so many different players, and you're going to see every single one that I just mentioned. We're talking 5 guys. And that's not even mentioning a guy like Jaden Hood, who I've been talking about forever and finally flashed in the spring game. He could be that next guy that kind of gets some opportunities. And Michigan's always been quick to try to put freshmen out there. How does a Jason Hewlett maybe fit in once fall camp comes? Of course, we're talking about guys who are what this looks like coming out of spring ball, and we don't have any fall camp projections for freshmen. But this is a 5 deep that right now you feel so good about. I am really, really pleased with that front 7. I mean, really pretty much almost all 11. Think about this. Everyone I have mentioned so far has been a star or a starter at some point, even if it was flashing. Rashawn Benny, Braden McGregor, and Derek Moore, Kenneth Grant, guys who flashed but haven't necessarily had the potential. You get to the linebackers. I mean, we're talking about guys that we know are good. Junior Colson, Mike Barrett, Nikhai Hill-Green. You add in Ernest Hausman and Jimmy Rolder. It's a depth that they haven't had at that position since 2016 maybe, when we're talking freshman Devin Bush behind the Mike McCray and Jabril, and it's really, really positive scenario here for Michigan. Let's do the safeties, then we'll do the corners. So the first safety position, I have Rod Moore as your entrenched starter. Again, a stud, right there, sitting there staring you in the face. Of course, this is 3-man rotation at the safety position. So the other one I have Makari Page or RJ Moten. Really, it's or. But it's a 3-man starting unit. You're going to see all 3 with quite a ton of regularity. This is probably the only place where I feel like maybe you don't see the backups as much. Quentin Johnson, I think, maybe you'll see him a bit. Had an interception in the spring game, started playing safety on the field a bit late last year after we've been waiting. Remember, he's a former 4-star, committed at the Army All-American game some years back in 1922. It feels like he's been there forever. So I have Quentin Johnson as the backup to Rod Moore, but I have him as an or with Keon Sabb, because it felt like Keon Sabb did some really good things in the spring game. Wasn't flashy, wasn't like a guy that you sat there and said popped off the page. Again, as a former 5-star, finished as a 4-star. A little disappointing that it isn't that, right? Because generally, especially at a place like Michigan, a 5-star type talent or a high 4-star type talent is usually going to see the field early and often. Hasn't been the case for him. But I liked what I saw out of him from the spring game. I feel like he's going to work his way into the rotation as much as the other 3 will allow. And I guess Quentin Johnson. At the other safety position, I've got, and I'm guessing that's Amazon that's here. I'm going to add another name to this for the backups here. The other safety position, like I said, it's Makari Page or RJ Moten. I have the backups as being Zeke Berry or Caden Colasar. Remember, Colasar was getting involved before his injury, and then his injury precluded him, obviously, in week 5, tore his ACL. He's still working his way back, but I think he's going to be a factor. He's on scholarship now. Jim Harbaugh loves him, absolutely loves him. Obviously, Jay Harbaugh, now coaching safeties, knows what he can do. So I feel like that's that. Zeke Berry, interception, finally kind of, how long have I been talking about Zeke Berry? So it's a matter of him making good. But here's the issue. Like I said, I think you're kind of looking at 5 guys for sure. Rod Moore, Makari Page, RJ Moten, Caden Colasar, Quentin Johnson. Keon Sabb and Zeke Berry are wild cards. Of course, they're going to try to work them in, I feel like, early, especially in the non-conference, but we'll see if come conference play, if that page is still turned, if that's still lit up. All right, we're going to continue on here in just a moment, and we're going to finish out with all of the cornerback positions. One thing about this house, by the way, and certainly I'm sure the microphone's picking it up, because this microphone picks up everything. I got train tracks right there, which also could be why Zuri starts barking, because she's mad at those trains. She's ready to go get them. I don't mind having it right there, to be honest. It doesn't bother me none. All right, let's start with the nickelback position, which is key for Michigan's defense, has been for even in the Don Brown era. Your obvious guy, again, we're starting off with a star player, a stud. It's Mike Sainristil still. That's an obvious. That's a slam dunk. Mike Sainristil still starts you off as the nickelback. But who's backing him up? And that's what I'm not 100% certain on. Because it could be one of the guys who's like already a corner. I feel like, because I didn't look at the roster when I filled this out, I'm just kind of going off of who I feel is really good and all that kind of stuff. I feel like I'm missing someone in there. And I didn't cut down Cody Jones, who I feel like has a possibility. I did not feel that Cody Jones had the best spring game. I put Jair Hill. Now he's a little tall, a little lanky, but I feel like he's got the quickness to be able to play that nickel position. Will he do it in year 1? I think marginally, because I also don't think that you're going to see a lot of Mike Sainristil still coming off the field when they need him out there. I think that's the number one. But that's who I have for the 2 nickels. I'm almost certainly wrong here, but this is what my personal projection is. I know there's going to be people yelling at me in the comments. I don't read them most of the time. So I'm sorry to the people who have legitimate questions. The negative fans drown you out, so I don't go. All right, so obvious second star starting corner is Will Johnson. Again, banged up in spring, didn't see him, but I think he's your obvious starter. He's the guy you're building the entire secondary around, and that even almost includes the safeties, because he's just that good. And I mean, when you think about the fact that he was second on the team in interceptions and only really played significant minutes in the back end of the season, that tells you just how good he got, how quick. I did not phrase that well. I have his backup as Jaden McBurrows, who, he's a different style, right? He's a little bit smaller, but hits like a freight train, as we heard from DJ Turner and Jamon Green. Thought he looked pretty decent from what I could see. Again, I didn't go back and rewatch the spring game yet. But from what I noticed, I thought he looked pretty good. The other corner starter, I'm going to stick with Amarian Walker. I don't think he had the best spring game, but he's getting new to being that type of guy. He got burned several times by Peyton O'Leary. That's not great, no matter how much you feel like Peyton O'Leary might actually be relatively decent. Steve Clinkscale was screaming his head off at him quite a bit. So again, these rotations are the situations where, maybe typically Michigan's like to have 3 or more cornerbacks. So I just named 3 right there, but I think the 4th has a good chance of really seeing the field as well, and that's Miles Pollard. Because I feel like Miles Pollard, again, another guy, interception in the spring game. He's been mentioned as a guy who's been working in. I certainly could make this or German green, but German didn't participate in the spring game, so I don't really know for sure if he's really, you hope that he has a similar skill set to his brother, but he hasn't had the time on task that his brother has. So, but Miles Pollard, former 3-star, had those Alabama, I think he had LSU as well, basically offers from all the guys that you want to see. Really started to kind of come on, figure things out, looked really good in his opportunity in the spring game. So the good news is that most of these guys are going to play. The ones that we're not as sure about, Miles Pollard, Zeke Berry, Keon Sabb, that's the next group. They don't need to be cast into the fire just yet, unless you're just trying to retain them. These are guys that can really, you need them next year for sure. Maybe not even like Miles Pollard. You don't even need them for sure. Right now, there's a lot of untapped potential. Cornerback is the one area where you look at it and you're saying, I don't know. But listen to these names. Jair Hill, former 4-star. Jaden McBurrows, 3-star, but had the Alabama and LSU offers and just hasn't been healthy. Amarian Walker, who's being called a unicorn. Miles Pollard, a 3-star who had every big time offer that you could want. Even at the other positions, Keon Sabb, Zeke Berry, Ernest Hausman, Jimmy Rolder. This all has Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant. This all has the makings of that feeling of, you know what? Even though you're going to lose a Chris Jenkins, you're going to lose Jalen Harrell. You're probably, you might lose a Josiah Stewart. You still are looking at all of these names and saying, this might still be a really nasty defense next year. If some of these key guys can keep on moving forward, stepping up, then everything might be in just a really good situation. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Like I said, I'm going to try for an Easter Sunday episode to make up for no Friday, and we'll just kind of try to roll through. Of course, we're kind of in a little bit of a couple week lull till we get to the spring trip, the NFL draft, all that kind of stuff. But we will find a way to make do. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you again soon. Peace.